recorded live.
Hello, this is Michael Adams, and it's Nothing But the Truth, One Man's Journey to Find It. It is January the 5th, 2016, apparently, actually, the false year, and the false time, as far as according to our Creator, our God's calendar. So, with that, we have Zen Garcia with us once again to do another episode of what I'm titling the series, A Conversation with Zen Garcia, A to Z, Z to A, I believe, in the truth or to the truth or something like that. I can't even remember now what I titled it. My apologies. We also have Brad Varnholdt with us. This will be the first time that he's actually joined me on the show, and we have. Oh no, that's not true. You and I did we have a show last week, didn't we, Brad? I've had so much go on. I think I need to take a day off. Maybe. Well, I will have to anyways. I get my son tomorrow night and have him till Friday, so nothing will be going on for a couple of days. So, anyways, yeah. So it's A to Z, Z to A in the way, the truth, and the life. And so this is a very. I guess it would be a part 4. I got to retitle that as well. Once again, we're going to have some fascinating discussion. We'll talk more about Zen's work in a little bit, and we'll talk with Brad and some of the things he's been up to as well. As we will probably be talking a little bit tonight, as usual, about the flat Earth and all the false science out there. One must be reminded that Neil deGrasse Tyson presented Jesuit priest James Martin, S.J., as the spokesman for a religion justifying the heliocentric model, the Big Bang, and evolution. So one should think about those things. Now with that, thank you, gentlemen, for enduring my little dialogue there, but I thought that it was some very useful information as we go through this new year and with this generalization of the hierarchy and as they reveal more and more of their satanic agenda. Once again, Zen Garcia, thank you for joining me, and Brad Varnholdt, thank you for joining me. Gentlemen, how are you doing?
Excellent. Glad to be here.
Good. Thanks for having us on this evening.
Now, you might ask yourself, why did I do that? Well, last night we were talking, folks, and we were talking about many things. And one of the things I've been doing is I've been reading the book of Adam and Eve, and about how in the Kosh, Satan and his hosts have been here for a very long time, even before we have. And I think there's real relevance in this, whether it's just maybe you might find it just superstition and childlessness and strangeness, but apparently for thousands of years there have been men and women who have been doing this, channeling and trying to have the good graces of Satan in his house. And I find that still, even 2015, nothing has changed at all. Zen, do you have any comments about that? Could you share a little bit about that?
Well, the powers, these principalities, the rulers of darkness, they are the entities at the top of the Illuminati pyramid. They are the all-seeing eye. And so what we are witnessing here, as far as current events and the coming forth of the New World Order, and now with the internet, the exposure where the masses are learning about these rulers, the sons of Cain, and how they've been ruling from the shadows, and they've been doing the bidding of their father, the devil, as Christ put it in Matthew, that you are of your father, the devil, and it's very literal. And what he describes also in Matthew chapter 13 with the enemy that snuck into the garden and that sowed the tares, and that when the angels asked him, "Do you want us to uproot the tares?" he said, "No, let both grow together until the time of the end," and that's where we are now. And this is why we see in those that have come forth, like I'm doing an interview tomorrow night with Carolyn Hamlin, and she is one of those that was raised in these Illuminati families and was part of these ritualistic bloodlines, and they do perform these kind of satanic rituals. They're involved in pedophilia, and she gives an insider report on what she calls the establishment and the plan, and talks about it lines up with what is revealed in the protocols of the learned elders of Zion and all these other insider texts, Illuminati insider texts, because they're not trying to hide their agenda. It's my opinion that they actually speak it out and share it with the masses, and that's one of their ways of laughing at everybody and making fun of everybody and hiding everything in plain sight. And the Masons and the secret societies, they openly worship, especially at the higher levels, Lucifer as the light bearer, Satan as the adversary, and they don't try to hide it. And it's written, and it's totally open as far as like morals and dogma. The Bible of the Masonic, these secret societies, and he even declares it in there, and so all these things, even though they're shocking and they seem just bizarre to people that haven't studied or looked into the conspiratorial side of what's going on in the world, people that don't know about the other side of it, 9/11, government-sponsored terror, how the vaccines are creating and perpetuating disease, and the poisons that are in the food and water, and all these things just seem like total lunacy, the chemtrails. But when you do your research, they're very true, and they're manifestations of this war between the sons of light and the sons of darkness, as it says in one of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And this is the ongoing war that began in heaven, and the rebel angels being cast out, as you said, before we were placed here and before modern humanity was created. And that it's a continuation of the enmities which occurred in the garden. Eve's beguilement with Satan, her impregnation with Cain, this enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, the lineage of Cain and the lineage of Seth, the wheat and the tares, the goat and the sheep, those that follow the broad path of destruction and those that follow the narrow way. It's the left-hand path and the right-hand path, those that are priests and those that are kings, the divine right to rule, and then the rest of us, the useless eaters. And so that's what's going on, and unless you awaken to this, you really don't know who your enemy is.
I agree with you. Do you think, I was looking at, I've mentioned this, we've talked about this before, but I want to talk about it again because I really do, there's a couple of things I want to say. First, you said about, conspiracy, and if you don't know that the conspiracy theories or there's conspiracies out there, but they like reality. To call, that's real. That's what I was going to say. The truth is that we are really talking about, the truth is we're talking about reality. We're not talking about conspiracy theories. We're talking about reality now, folks. I just shared with you some reality, the intros of this show. None of this is made up. And so what do you do about that? I mean, except you got to be honest about it. I'm thinking about all these extra biblical quote unquote texts that were taken out, that they say no longer, they're blasphemous and they're misleading. And yet, as I'm reading this stuff, it's making the picture much, much clearer. I think about this, and I think about the public school system. I think about religion as a whole at this point. I think about everything that's going on in our lives. Every institution out there is actually designed to keep us ignorant, not only dumb down, but ignorant of the truth. Do you gentlemen recognize this? Do you recognize what I'm talking about here? What do you think, Brad?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to what you were saying, Zen, you articulated that very well, and I think the first thing to battle against this is just being aware of it and knowing it. And they throw the label of conspiracy theorist around and fear monger. Yeah, they throw those labels around so loosely, and put so much emotion and hatred or animosity behind it that people often are afraid to speak out and say how they feel or what their reality is. But once you can, my experience has been once you can get someone to look at the actual reality of it, it's extremely empowering to be able to see through the smoke and mirrors and the hidden in plain sight, and see past all the labels. And once you're able to see that, then you are in a place of true reality, and then you're able to understand what takes place in the world around you. And for me personally, and for the people that I know that have been able to get past the labels that are thrown around and see it for what it is, are reinvigorated and empowered to recognize the world for really what it is.
Yeah. What's your take on that, Son? What do you answer?
Well, I want to share something really quick from the Apocalypse of Moses, because this will kind of re-emphasize from Scripture what we're talking about. It says this. And after this, Adam and Eve were with one another, and while they were sleeping, Eve said to Adam, her Lord, my Lord, Adam, behold, I have seen in a dream this night the blood of my son Abimelech, who is styled Abel, being poured into the mouth of Cain, his brother. And he went on drinking it without pity. But he begged him to leave him a little of it, yet he hearkened not to him, but gulped down the whole. Nor did it stay in his stomach, but came out of his mouth. And Adam said, let us arise and go and see what has happened to them. I fear lest the adversary may be assailing them somewhere. And they both went and found Abel murdered by the hand of Cain, his brother. And God said to Michael the archangel, say to Adam, reveal not the secret that thou knowest to Cain thy son, for he is a son of wrath. And so, this whole story talking about Cain killing his brother and then consuming his blood, it goes all the way back to the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. And there's another text when, after you both comment, I'll read a little bit from it, but it is the most interesting passage because it gives us an insider's view of what's going on with the elites and what they think about the differentiation between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, because they absolutely believe that there is a physical and a DNA and a genetic difference. It actually won't take me long to pull it up, but it's, again, it's one of those things that is totally mind-blowing. I added this to my book, the second edition of my fourth book, Lucifer, Father of Cain, because it was just so mind-blowing and so, insightful as far as what it presents. And so let me get you to comment, and then I'll find it and I'll read this for you, and then get you guys to comment afterwards, because yours is going to be like, wow.
Okay. You want to say something? You want to start off, Brad, or you want me to?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, the thing I was thinking about, of course, because I started out the show with reading these articles about the devil Hughes. But, you know, I'm not really laughing at him. I'm laughing at the absurdity of it. I feel actually a lot of empathy and compassion for the man. The man actually reveals a little bit in the article about how he grew up in a home that his father was, you know, this rock and roll dad that was abusive. What does that exactly mean? Those are all kind of code words, folks. At least for me, because I was in the music industry, and what we're talking about now is what a little bit about what Zen was talking about, these tares, if you will, these people that really are really Satan worshipers. They really do worship Lucifer and his hosts. They do believe that they will receive riches, and actually they actually do in this world. They're condemned themselves for all eternity, but they don't seem to really care. They seem to be more concerned about the here and now. And here's a guy who's becomes a quote-unquote Catholic priest, and it really doesn't matter if he's a Catholic priest or an Eastern Orthodox priest or if he was a Baptist pastor. The fact of the matter is that he's blatant, right in front of your face, making a mockery of God. Here's a guy, you know, he does a show and he has his fifth of Jack Daniels in his skull and pictures of Make-A-Wit around him, talking as if he's a representative of Christ. Now, this is very disturbing, and I got a feeling that this is something that's been going on from the very get-go. When we think about Cain, and once again, you know, there's another thing about Hughes. You know, he's promoting guns. I don't have any problem with self-defense. I don't have a problem with anybody having a gun, but I don't have any of this. I don't have any of this fervor that we got, you know, guns and shooting guns. I don't even have a gun. I don't even have a desire to have a gun. I believe my protection is in my faith in my Lord and Savior, Yeshua the Messiah, and wherever it takes me is where it takes me. And if he wants me to burn at a stake or wants some dude to show up someday and rob me and do whatever, then, or if he doesn't want any of that to happen, he's in control. So why would I want to be focusing on this? But you can see the messages that were coming out of that article and coming out of this individual, and none of it is really of God. And so I look back at Cain and his response to Abel and his, I just, you know, I've been angry before, but my anger has never been, I've never in my life have ever had, and I've had some cruddy things happen to me, had the desire to kill anybody. So I can't comprehend it. And the only thing I can think about is whatever Cain has and the terror has, apparently you and I don't have. I would assume that the rest of you, the two of you, don't have. I certainly don't. I have no desire to kill anybody. I just never had. You know what I mean? I only been in one fight, and that was out of self-defense. And then I remember after I beat up the kid, I felt so bad, I cried in front of him, in front of all of his buddies, because I didn't want that to happen. So I just don't understand it. So what do you want to say, Brad?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think violence is ever the answer, and it is kind of scary to think about that stuff. You know, one of the things Zen said earlier about how these Satanists and people are into pedophilia and sacrifice and all that kind of stuff. You know, for some of the studying that I've done and what I've come across is, it seems as though if you read some of the stories of the Queen, and not just the current Queen, but some of the older queens of England and kings, you know, they were into this drinking of blood, and you know, the Creator specifically said, you know, not to drink the blood, not to eat anything of blood. You know, there was really strict dietary rules, and so I think there's a couple things that between the scriptures and between what these Satanists and people that believe in these sacrificing and drinking of blood. There's a couple levels to it, I believe, and one is access. They don't seem to allow people access to the masses through either media or entertainment or any mainstream access to the masses without first compromising yourself in a way that could completely destroy yourself. So my thinking is that they record you sacrificing something or being involved in a sacrifice, or pedophilia, some way that you're compromised so that they can hang that over your head, because there's no trust, there's no honesty between them. There's only violence and leverage. And so if you want access, and that's part of the selling your soul to the devil process, I believe, is putting yourself in a compromising position where they have the control over you to take you down and destroy you if you don't march to the rules of the game. The other thing that is quite fascinating to me is this idea of the drinking of the blood, of the longevity. There's been some reports and some studies out there of people who have received large blood transfusions, receiving memories.
Oh, wow.
That they didn't have before the blood transfusion. There's also reports and studies out there of people who have received large blood transfusions developing skills and interests that they didn't have before. So,
well, maybe the case. I'll be honest with you. My own personal experience with my multiple sclerosis, because I have it's called relapsing remitting, and I'm at more of the advanced stages. Although not in a wheelchair right now, thank goodness. I have been, and I still have to walk with a cane, and I can't run or do anything. And so, but anyways, regardless of that, the past couple relapses I've had, they've actually given me plasma transfusions for like 5 days, which is the same thing what you're talking about. It's blood transfusion, right? It's plasma, and as a way to sustain my life and keep me going, because really I probably should be actually in a nursing home right now or dead based on the disease that I have and the relapses I've had. So there is a truth to that. But in the same token, I have to give encouragement to people about something. I have discovered the thing in my life the past couple of years, the thing that maintains me and keeps me going more than anything is the developed abiding faith in my Lord and Savior, Yeshua the Messiah, Jesus Christ. That's what keeps me going and keeps my, me directed on on Him and a more meaningful thing, you know what I mean, than just what I can get out of the here and now. So I see that what happens a lot of times with this, if you follow the left path, what doesn't seem to be, which is really the broad path, that, your whole focus is going to be about the here and now and what you can get out of this world and how big of a box or a house you can get and your trophy wife and the status of men and all that kind of thing. But I don't have any of that. None of that. So, yeah. You know what I mean? So I really believe that the power of faith in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ overrides everything that happens here. I really do, from my own personal experience.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we touched base on this last night. It's He shepherds. If we're under His authority and protection, He shepherds us through this realm and this life and keeps us safe and protects us from that.
That's I think what is lacking with the folks that you're talking about, a compromise. They don't have the Spirit of God with them. They don't have that abiding faith in Christ, and therefore their faith is in this world and what they can get out of it in their own abilities and abilities of others. And I really believe that if you're a follower of Yeshua the Messiah, you're not going to be the President of the United States. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, agreed.
You're just not going to be there. You're not going to go down that path, and he's not going to let you.
Yeah, they're just not going to give you access. And the person that wants to follow Yeshua and the Creator is not going to want access anyway. So, on that same note, just to finish out my thought, if you put yourselves in a fun mental exercise is to put yourself in the shoes of a billionaire, and
what a trap! What a trap! What a Satan's most brilliant traps of all. Go ahead.
Yeah. So you have all the money that you would ever need for generation after generation to come, to be able to buy and live any way that they chose to do so. So there's really no need to work. There's no need to the only thing, and if you take it out to its full extension and you think about it and exercise your mind around what it would be like to be in that situation. I mean, these people have jets, their own private jets, and they can hop in a jet just like you and I can walk out our front door and hop in our car and drive down to the grocery store. They can hop in their private jet and hop across the earth to a different location just as easily and simply and relatively for the same cost that it costs you and I to gas up our car, right? So there's really no difference in that, except they have a larger neighborhood that they move about, and so borders mean nothing. Borders mean nothing to them. Cost of fuel means nothing to them. They have the ultimate freedom to move about this earth and do anything that their heart desires. The only thing that they don't have, that they can't purchase, which they try, is longevity.
Oh, even something more important, I think, is the peace in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I cannot imagine the torment. Well, let me rephrase it. I can actually imagine their torment. Before I came to the Lord, I was very much a driven man about self, about what the world thought about me, about what I could acquire. How many times I've been beat up. I'm a loser, I'm a failure because I'm not meeting up to the standards of this satanic system. I know exactly the horror, the torment, the fear, the desperation that all these people have. Yeah, they have their trinkets, and yeah, they can go their places here and there. But you know what? Is it real freedom? I don't believe so. I think they're so enslaved, so ensnared. And how many of those also end up losing their firstborn in some kind of weird way, or one of their children? How many end up losing and cursing generations of their family in order just to have trinkets, pieces of, and now will change, but of these talismans, these dollar bills with all their satanic symbolism, their God. What is their God? I feel terrible for these people. Right. I used to have anger for them. You know what I mean? And what crooked, terrible people they are. But now I feel absolute sadness and pity for them. I really do. I know that sounds kind of condescending and all that, but I really do feel that way. I feel like that these people really are cursed. Well, what do you have to think about that? What do you have to say about this, Don?
Well, I'm going to read this real quick first, because, I guess I'll comment. I feel for them too, because it's not all roses and butterflies and daisies. It's like, having interviewed, because I've interviewed Carolyn I don't know, maybe 6, 7 times now. And she talks about how, as a young child, she was abused from the time that before she even had memory to remember, and that, you know, for her, from her home family, those people that you trust to take care of you and to comfort you at night and protect you from others, and they were her abusers and her torturers. And from a very early age, she talked about how they had instituted into these bloodlines, into these Illuminati families, programmers that would teach the young girls how to please these older gentlemen, and not just men, but they're bisexual in the Illuminati, and they basically raised her as a sex slave, and she knew no difference, and thought this was normal until she realized it wasn't. But it was long, many years, and much pain and suffering and much mental anguish and split personality. And I mean, and they do this to their own children, I mean, and so the suffering is ungodly. And is it worth it? I mean, for the money and for the prestige, and because so many do run, like herself. She ran from when she had the free will to understand that all that was not right, and when she discovered Christ, she ran from it and escaped from it and was protected from it. And there are many others, like I was talking about Savali last night when you guys were talking about Greg Szymanski, and she was one that also spoke about how, as a young girl, she remembered being taken with all these other young children down into this almost like a underground bunker beneath one of these castles, or what, maybe it was even in the Vatican. I don't remember exactly, but she talked about seeing this obsidian black, very smooth table where they had offered and sacrificed this young child. And her and these other young kids, they were forced to endure and to witness and to be silent about having witnessed that. And this occurred to them many times. And she was raised to be one of these programmers that, when she was younger, in her teenage years, she was the teacher. She was teaching and programming and doing these things to others. And so it's insane, the insanity of these bloodlines and what they even do to their own children. I mean, and then for the masses, they have no concern and no care, no compassion. That's why they're able to, when they do reach a place of prestige as far as prime ministership or presidency or some kind of head of, they're just puppets on a string, and they are doing the bidding of those that are truly the powers from behind the scenes, the Oz behind the mask, and they have no qualms at all with signing the death warrants of many innocent people, instituting things like torture and indefinite detention, and all of these things that totally are harmful and hurt other human beings. There's no compassion, no feeling for any of that. But anyways, I'm going to read this story for you because I think you will benefit, and your listeners will benefit from me sharing this. And just to set the background, set the foundation for what I'm going to be reading, because this is only an excerpt, and you can find the full story in my fourth book, Lucifer, Father of Cain, and the bonus edition in the second edition portion about it. But anyways, this individual, he inherited his friend's investigative research. And his friend was one of the top DNA genetic researchers. And he was hired by an individual that was one of these elitists and one of these that were raised in these Canaanite families. And he had been taught by his family that they were different and they were superior and they were genetically, psychically more apt than the regular population. And he wanted to know if there truly was a genetic anomaly associated to the sons of Cain. So he hired this individual to do this research. But before he was able to finish, both the doctor and the individual that hired him were suicided. And so this individual that shares the story that I'm about to read, he inherited his research, and this is the conclusions and the determination that he had come to as far as what he was getting himself into. And so it says this. In his notes, my friend penned some personal thoughts after having considered his observations and the source of his DNA materials. On the plane ride back stateside, my friend, who at the time was one of the most knowledgeable DNA researchers on the planet, plane of course, pulled out the biggest piece of mental jerky I've ever gnawed on. His benefactor, test subject, believed that while most of the sons of Adam had double-strand DNA, he had been told by his family that he and his blood relatives were distinctly different and that he, like his fathers before him, had triple-strand DNA. He wanted my friend to secretly prove once and for all if this was true or not. The subject claimed that his extended family and their cousins, who are kings, queens, princesses, and princesses, as well as leaders of industry and banking worldwide, believe they are children of an otherworldly race of humanoid beings. He'd been taught by his tutors that once upon a time his ancestors had fallen to earth after some cosmic calamity in the time before the garden. He believed that while their ancestral mother was Eve, their ancestral father was not Adam. He was torn to know if a child of Cain was actually genetically different and whether he could be saved. He thought of the Vatican's pronouncement that the aliens are our cousins and the Vishnu teachings of a time when gods flew in spaceships and destroyed whole cities in a single blast. He even had notes about Elijah being caught up in a chariot of fire. Maybe he had misread or misunderstood the entire history of his Bible. Maybe from Genesis to Revelation, it was about some far more tangible and real fallen angel alien cousins than the ghost-like destroying angels he's always pictured in his imagination. It only matters what they believe because our original subject and his relatives, who are kings, queens, princesses, and princesses, as well as leaders of industry and banking worldwide, they believe and act as though they are children of an otherworldly race of humanoid beings, but not human only, hybrid human, more than human, superior alien humans. Our subject and his kin had been taught by their families and tutors that once upon a time their ancestors had fallen to earth after this cosmic calamity in the time before the garden, and he believed that while their ancestral mother was Eve, their ancestral father was not Adam. They believe they are our humanoid cousins, superior hybrids, half alien and only half human. They once reigned from Olympus and were pharaohs. Whatever the real truth of their history, their belief is the driver of their actions. being the true believers they are, they will continue to operate in accordance with their belief and the laws of alien Darwinian type survival. And that's why they interbreed, to maintain the purity of their bloodline. That's why they secretly meet and connive to pass power between themselves. And that's why they must fool the rest of mankind into wars of self-destruction and debt, so that we may be forever enslaved to their lust on this prison planet till death do us part. More than afraid, they know in their hearts this is a fight for survival, and it had begun, just as my friend had said, as a murder investigation, starting with the first murderer, when that Luciferian demon dad had first whispered of the evil deed to his willing child, Cain. It continued down through time, the sons of Adam fighting for survival and destroying the alien giants in Canaan land, David and the hybrid Goliath, and his 4 hybrid brothers, and all the hidden true believers since, hiding in plain sight, so powerful and so important, yet so afraid. These earthbound half-cousins of ours continue to laugh, but it is a nervous laugh at that, as they have a joke or two at our expense, recreating their lying father's fall to earth and flashing their heretofore secret Masonic hand signs to each other, right in our face. I know now how dangerous their beliefs are, because they are being driven by their beliefs, taught to them by their real alleged father, the father of lies. And even now he knows the truth and whispers in his initiate's ears, just as he first did in Cain's ear. The sons of Adam, as long as they live, are dangerous. And that's the end of it.
Interesting. Now, where is this again? What is this story from?
It's from a report that was released by Steve Quell in one of his alerts. I think it was in February 2015 or something like that. I don't remember exactly. I have it sourced in my book, Lucifer, Father of Cain, the full story, where it tells you about the investigation, about his friend being murdered, and also about the test subject being murdered. I just took, an excerpt out of it, the most interesting and as far as insightful in what we're talking about this evening, to share with you and to give you an insight on this story. But it's very long. It's I don't know, maybe 8 pages in my book, but it's very detailed and very insightful when you read the fullness of the story.
Wow. This is terrible. It makes me think about this Jesse the Devil Hughes. Did he? Because did his father put him through all that? You know what I mean? I would put my money on it. That's the case. We see this over and over again. If people are willing to look at it, it's a very awful, dark subject that most of us don't want to explore. And that is these pedophile rings, satanic rings that are everywhere. Doesn't matter if it's America, Canada, Britain, France, Italy. Doesn't matter. It's everywhere. Every society and culture has these people at the top and that have been manipulating and indoctrinating us and deceiving us for a very, very, very long time. Since it's looking like from the very beginning. And it makes you think about the times of when during the flood, the times of Noah, and how bad was things. Things must have been really bad, a lot worse than we can imagine. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, are we? Christ said that these times they would come, and again, in his second coming, that it would be as the days of Noah. I mean, what exactly was he saying there? You know what I mean? That's the thing another thing that makes me think that a lot of the scriptural truths of it, because that's a huge question. A huge question. Listen, we think about it, I'm sure all three of us, when we read that, we thought, well, what exactly does that mean? And yet there's a giant, it's just a couple sentences there. That's all it is. And that's not, I just don't believe that that's the way God would operate. I think he would give us a lot more information about that particular time, times of Noah, and his second coming. And I think that the powers that be that we're talking about, these Luciferians, these rulers of evil, these people that run the show, have deliberately taken out a lot of the truths, just giving us the bare bone truths of text, just enough. And I guess God has allowed that. He's allowed it just enough for one to make a decision. And then after that is how how serious you are to know God. Because I've come to realize, although I have faith in Jesus Christ, it's now become a journey that's much different than I ever thought it would ever take me. And I see this with so many other folks that are truly trying to follow our Lord and Savior and the true and living God, that it takes you on a path and a journey that you just would not expect. It doesn't sit conveniently in a nice package where you just go to church on Sunday and belong to a group. He takes you to places where you just, once again, as the title of the show goes, the truth and the way, the truth, and the life. You know what I mean? He changes you completely. You see things you never would have considered or saw before in a different light. So I don't know. What do you have to say, Brad? Do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like a weightlifter building muscle. First, you have to break the muscle down and rebuild it, and we have to. That's how our spiritual journey is as well. I mean, we have to be patient, and we have to wait. And there's story after story of the patriarchs being incredibly patient, waiting for the Creator to come through for them at the very last moment. And that is the spiritual journey, and it is a continual test. And as we discussed, last night, it is a journey of maturing and growing, and you don't mature and grow without pain. And if you recognize it as that, it is oftentimes good pain, because you are learning and exploring and stuff. And as you mentioned just briefly a moment ago, looking into some of this darker stuff is stomach turning and disgusting. But and there's been many a time I've had to just get up from my computer or put the book down and walk away and go for a walk out in nature, because I'm so repulsed and so disgusted at what I'm reading and learning and understanding. But once you've made it through that, and the trials and tribulations of our life, once you make it through those trials and tribulations, I love to read the story of Job and look back at the story of Job. I mean, he was so he persevered, through unbelievable trials and tribulations. He persevered, never gave up on the Creator, and he was in the end blessed incredibly for it. And his blessings bless us today, just because we are able to read the story of his trials and tribulations.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm thinking about too is I think about what happened to Eve. What happened. I discovered this from Zen's work about Ham and Noah's second wife. Now we're talking about this again. It seems to be part of this whole satanic agenda is sexually violating another human being. It seems to be this over and over again. Satan was the first one who did it against with Eve, and then Ham with Noah's second wife. And now we're talking about this again. I know it's a very dark subject matter to talk about. If you guys don't want to talk about it, I understand. But it seems to be a big issue in all this. I don't know. Zen, what have you've done a lot of, obviously you must have thought about this if you discovered what happened with Noah and his second wife and Ham and Eve and Satan. I mean, what the heck's going on here with this?
I find that this is the one thing that even those that are the most holy and righteous as far as sexuality and the carnality of this world, that they will be holy in every way, like the different preachers and pastors, ministers. But when it comes to sex and being deviant in that way, they will give themselves liberty to indulge, and they feel like if they're as far as if they're holy in every other way, then they can be liberal in their sexual demeanor. And I find that the sin, the enmity, and the beguilement, the sexual nature that even Eve eating of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge good and evil, and how that really is metaphorical, symbolic of her being beguiled by the serpent, impregnated with Cain. This is the one sin that consumes this world so much that it causes the downfall. Even the angels, like the Watchers. Like if you read the story of the Watchers in the Keber Nagath in chapter 100, they were holy angels, and they were with Yeshua, but they were jealous of Adam, and they told on him almost like little kids. They told Yeshua about his sin and how he had been told only one thing, as far as to not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and yet he did it anyways after Eve had fallen and had done so, and then he repeated the act with her. And so these angels, they tell Yeshua that they would not fall if they were placed in the flesh, and so he takes them up on their boasting, and he places them into bodies of flesh. He gives them male bodies, and they are supposed to come down to the heavens because they leave their place of habitation, as it says in the book of Enoch. But they are supposed to come down to the earth, and they're supposed to testify and to be a testimony and a testament as to the Father and the Son and the whole plan of salvation, and how all that has already been, because of the fall, how there was a plan of salvation, a rescue mission to bring and to example everybody how to get home and how to have a return to our first estate, remember from whence thou art fallen. And immediately when they come down, it says they see the daughters of Cain scenting themselves and indulging in the orgies without shame. And they go a-whoring after the daughters of Cain. And immediately, and then they know that they are about to commit a grievous sin, and that it will cost them dearly because of their basically begging Yeshua to place them into the flesh and allow them to come down to the earth and to be a testament for him. And he tells them, be sure that you don't fall away, that you don't do as the children of men. And being placed in the human flesh, they immediately fall. I mean, like, they come down and then they make this mutual imprecations. They make this pact to commit to this sin and commit to this way, this action, because they know that if they take of wives of the daughters of men, that they're gonna be judged for it, and they're gonna be punished for it, and yet they choose to do it anyways. And so it just shows you the kind of temptation that sinful nature, that sexual deviance, the calling to indulge and to enjoy in the pleasures of this world, that it can entrap even angels, and it calls everybody. Because, like, I remember the story of, like, individuals like Ted Haggart and how he was involved with a male prostitute, and he was smoking crack with this guy, and he got caught, and he had to admit it to his congregation. But how many pastors that has been their downfall? And all these TBN pastors, Jim Baker, and how he fell, and then there was the Benny Hinn, and he got caught up with another pastor's wife. I forget exactly what her name was, but she also is another one of those big time TBN TV preachers, and all of them, they get caught up in this sexual sin and they fall away, and they get, because they're public figures, they get caught and they get busted. And it's just it just shows you how alluring and how difficult it is to remain. And just like Paul said, he wanted to present that Yeshua wanted to present Eve as a chaste virgin to Adam, but because of her beguilement, she wasn't a chaste virgin.
That's interesting. And, I think about my own self before I came to the Lord. I was a man of the world. Of course, that was a big part of it. So,
we all were.
Yeah, I was a womanizer and going after the flesh and pretty women and all that kind of stuff. And I think of all, there is. I hear, a lot of guys or a lot of other people say, oh, there's no consequence, there's no problem unless there's, as long as there's mutual consent between two adults, there's no problem. I disagree. From my own personal experience, everybody that I've ever dealt with as far as women in a relationship, and it breaks up, that kind of thing, or just whatever. There's something happens spiritually, emotionally. I also believe that there is absolutely no way for a man or a woman to have any defense to the sexual urges that we have unless we have continuous, abiding faith in Jesus Christ. At the same token, I don't agree with a lot of things that are going on. One of the things, some of the most dreadful things is like these Catholic priests and what they have to endure with their unnatural requirements, of them to becoming quote celibate, and inevitably, and nuns, and having them just end up doing what everyone else does, having affairs, fornicating, committing adultery. The catacombs, or these tunnels from nunneries to the dioceses, there's many of them throughout Europe and this country and Canada. You'll find the corpse of babies that were aborted. The more and more you look into this stuff, you go, there is a huge element to the fall of man and how Satan manipulates us through our sexual desires. And it is a very important thing to talk about. You need to talk about it in a way that's very mature, I think, spiritually and realistically, and because it is the battle that brings many a person down, our sexual desires. And I think from one experience that's ever worked for me is if I focus on my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And it doesn't mean I have to become a pastor or a priest or anything like that. I just need to focus on Him. I need to focus on Scripture. I need to focus on what's going on in this world. I need to focus on Him and what His promises are, and not what my lust and desires and passions are. I know a lot of people don't want to hear this, and I think this is also this Luciferian satanic system exploits is our lusts, our passions, our selfish desires, and has this empty promise that they can all be fulfilled. And in the end, what it leaves is using an empty vessel, ripe for a host of Satan to possess, or or something else. It's really quite disturbing to realize that you actually live in Babylon, and it has, you can call it United States, but Canada's the same way, and Mexico and France and China. This world at this point is so. There is nowhere else to run at this point, except in my experience, there is nowhere else to run at this point except to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. There's nothing else. And can I
make one other comment real quick?
Sure, but just let me finish this, and then we'll go.
Sure.
I just want to go back now to the book of Adam and Eve, and it was the same story with Adam and Eve, wasn't it? There was nowhere else for them to go.
Yeah, it all goes back to the very beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what caused the fall of man. But I was going to say that, people can maintain a healthy balance, that there's a sacred way to relate, and that sexuality is a blessing and a gift from the Most High for two people to share amongst themselves, as far as being a married couple and being in an intimate relationship and relating to each other in a way that is, is a reflection of a godly walk, and that even Adam and Eve coming together, it says how two souls, when they merge and meet that way, that it's like they become one flesh, and really when you make love to another person and the kind of experiences that you share and the feelings that you have, they take you to, it's like you're going to heaven. It's like paradise. It's like ecstasy, nirvana. It's the highest feeling, the most incredible experience that you can share with another individual. And those kind of things, done in a sacred way, they're absolutely the most holy experiences, and so there's a way to maintain a healthy balance. It's just that when you get perverted in your thoughts and you get led astray, like with the pedophile priests, even in John Perkins in the Confessions of Economic Hitman, they talk about how they corrupt people by offering them children or boys, as far as catching them in homosexual acts, and then they take photos and they compromise them, videotape them, and then they're able to control them and to use them for their own bidding because of these compromising, as far as the evidence that they have on these individuals. And there's so many people, like with the internet, it makes porn just so easy. All you have to do is type a keyword, and it makes it accessible to all the children and this generation, that sexual deviance becomes a very easy affair to romanticize in your mind and to see on the internet, or to see all the films. And I mean, even MTV, it's completely twisted, and everything is bombarding you to to cheat on your husband or your wife. There's all these shows where the ex-housewives and mistresses, and so everything is encouraging you to explore sexual deviance, and that's when you get yourself in trouble. And so I wanted to say that, just because I don't want people to think that we're frowning upon it, because it's a gift from God and it's an absolute blessing. But you have to walk, you have to maintain the holiness of it.
Well, you're right. I think this is the issue. Okay, so I'm a guy whose most of my adult life was, not all that great. So I didn't have God in my life, and I was doing what I wanted. So I have experience that I can just share, and I know what a lot of other men and women would go through. You know what? A lot of times there's these sexual interactions that we have with other people. You know, I have no idea about the pedophile thing. I have no idea about the bisexual thing or the homosexual thing. That was never put in me and driven in me. So, but I was a womanizer. So, and I look at myself and say, all the times that I slept with a woman, and I didn't really, it wasn't because I cared about them. This is because I had, like you said, these perversions, these fantasies that I wanted to fulfill, and I was exploiting and using them. That's not love. That's just exploitation. And then you see this happen all the time. Does man or woman? He said, "Well, I want this, and I want to have this, and I'm going to use this person." And when it's all done, we kick them to the side. We throw them under the bus. This is not what I believe God was meant for this between a man and a woman to happen. I think it's, you get together with a man, or if you're a woman, you give the man, and man, you give the woman, and you make a commitment to each other and before God that you're going to stick it out. I have my own opinions about state marriage and all that stuff, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I agree with making a commitment between you two in front of God and others, in that presence of God, and not some kind of, state-run controlled situation where then in the end they end up being able to take advantage of your children. And you're going to find that a lot of these pedophile rings are being run through governments, and they exploit dysfunctional families and parents and choose kids, and then, you know what I mean?
Fact.
Yeah.
Child protective services.
Yes. And so I think it's what I think is so important that we, as a man and woman, that we make that commitment to each other and God. First and foremost, and actually, if you think about that too, like this big thing this past year was, about gay marriage. Well, I personally think, is because we live in Babylon, I think we went in the wrong direction. I think that Christians, we said, hey, listen, government shouldn't have been involved in our marriage at all. Why don't we just have no government involvement in our relationships? Why don't we go back to commitment with God? Let me ask you this. Did Abraham and his wife, did they have to go to a government agency and get a license? Or did they go before God?
Of course not.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, and in the day, that's really what it comes down to. And they will say, well, your boyfriend, girlfriend, or you're not really married. Well, that's according to the state. That's controlled by Satan. So what do I care what they think? You know what I mean? What I care about is what I do with a woman and before God. And it's really weird right now because God's put me in a position where that's the worst thing in the world for me to be involved in is with a woman. I get fine example. I'll be a living example of it. I'll tell on myself. I'm a single father who raises my son on an average 4 to 5 days a week by myself while I'm battling MS. Why is that? Because back in the day when I first met his mother, I was involved in this and at the Unity Church and practicing all this Luciferian stuff. I had no idea it was a time, but it was in the visualization and the things that I wanted in the world. And, well, Satan and his minion gave it to me. And they gave me a very dysfunctional woman. Yeah, we had great sex and all, but we didn't have a kid. And now that poor child's going to have to live the rest of his life in a broken, dysfunctional family because I did not listen to the Word of God, and I didn't know it, first of all, and I didn't listen to the Spirit that was telling me, deep down inside, it's telling me, you know what, you're not really doing the right thing. Are you really thinking about what's right here? So I'm no different and no less guilty than, in a lot of ways, than those angels that you talked about that came down to heaven. You know what I mean?
Me too.
Yeah.
Same thing. But hey, I think we should give Brad a chance to voice in if he should so desire.
Absolutely.
You guys are doing so well. I'm just here admiring the good exchange, and I too have lived freely in the world, and in my and in our discussion, Michael, last week, I shared a bit of my journey and how I had, as the world would have you say, arrived, and in the sense of the world, was a success, but couldn't have been more unhappy and more miserable. And after working so many years and so hard to get to that point, and living of the world and being of the world, and it was an eye opener, and so it is an amazing trap that is set for us, of flesh and of thinking that more is better and versus quality, and a bonded, close relationship with someone you love and cherish is far greater than multitudes, and so yeah, it's interesting how they set that, how that trap is set through media and through society and peer pressure and everything, and then you get there and it's a snowball rolling down a hill. It just gets bigger and bigger, and you just until the point where it just eats you alive, eats your soul.
Yeah, it makes me think about what happened to Eve, what her spiritual, emotional experience must have been when she screwed up with Satan. And then also, in the fall, when they were, taken out of the garden, and there were, basically God gave them the cave of the treasures. I don't know if you know about this, Brad, but I've been reading about this in the book of Adam and Eve, and the cave of the treasures, and how these, it's interesting that first 50 chapters, it really talks a lot about this impulsive nature that part of the fall of man, and how Satan exploited that, our fears and our worries and our desires. They wanted so much to go back into the garden. They reckoned, they didn't like what they were seeing and what they were in. They were scared and terrified in this new world that we live in, with the night and the heat of the sun and the cold of the night, the darkness, and all this kind of thing, and how Satan actually exploited our desires and our impulsive nature. And it seems to me like a part of by applying God's teachings in our lives and putting Him first, one of the big things is not only to recognize Him and He's our solution, but also that He gives us something called patience, discipline, to not act upon the impulsive desires that plague us. And I think that really this satanic system we live in, it keeps us in a immature spiritual and emotional state for a very long time. They call it being like an adult child, that kind of thing, where, men and women, although they might have, PhDs and really responsible jobs, but emotionally and spiritually they're so adolescent and so ignorant and so shallow that they're so easily preyed upon by the satanic system. So I think it's really disturbing what we've been put in. I can only think of what it's like maybe a few generations ago, before all the television and radio and all these the lusts for power and career and money and things. How people had more patience and discipline, and just in that, how important that is. I mean, I can imagine. I don't know. You guys get what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about that last night as well with Chris, and I think I shared this with you last week. His work with the Hebrew, the self-defining Hebrew of what has been defined in the Bible as sin is literally to have fear. And, I find that really inspiring and amazing to think about sin as fear. And, that kind of dovetails with what you were saying in the book of Adam and Eve, which I haven't read all of it, but I've read probably the first half of it. Fascinating book. It is true. And if you think think about the idea of to have fear and sin and what we have been told is sin or contrary to the Creator's law, there's not anything that we would not break a single one of Creator's laws if we had no fear. You know, I steal because I fear that I don't have enough. I lie because I fear of the consequences or the outcome of me telling the truth. I cheat because I fear that I don't have enough love or I need more love, you know. So everything that we, in my mind, everything that is a sin is the result of fear. And if through the power of the Holy Spirit and the Creator and the redemption of Yeshua, we shouldn't have any fear, and we should be free from any fear and confident to move through this life successfully.
Yeah. Or at least we should have our fear directed in the right place, and we don't. We have fear of the things of this world and our own desires and wants. And you know, instead of you know what God says, we don't seem to have much fear about Him. And I don't want to make that sound like, you know, God's terrible. I don't think He's a terrible entity. He's not this terrible being. He's our Heavenly Father, I believe, is, you know, a just and loving God. I just think that we don't have fear in the proper area. The consequence of our behavior. And we don't have you know, our fear is in these things of this world. So, but you know, I guess it's, you know, I look back at what happened in Adam and Eve in that book, the book of Adam and Eve, and what happened to Adam and Eve when they had fallen and they were kicked out of the garden. And well, it first started out because they didn't have enough of the right, I guess, fear for God and His rules. You know what I mean? They broke it. They deliberately did it because they wanted something more than what God had to offer. So and then they lived their existence in this new world full of fear and confusion and worry, and how easily Satan and his hosts were able to manipulate them, confuse them, direct them. And as they were going to, I guess that one of the part of the stories is when Satan and his host took them to the top of this mountain. Zen might do a better job explaining that, but you know, here again, God had to intervene and say, "Hey, whoa, and stop things." But it seems to be that same story that over and over and over again, because of the fall, that our lack of faith in God, what He has to say, and how easy we all are to be manipulated without Him.
I look at it like this because, you know, when we come into the flesh and we're born, and even if we're raised in the church and we go to Sunday school and listen to the sermons and everything, when a child reaches, you know, about the teenage years and they have this, they go through puberty and they have all these raging hormones, I equate that to kind of the story of Eve, that when they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, losing their bright nature, losing their immortality, being cast out of paradise, exiled here to the garden, to the earth, then being transformed into flesh, and Eve being then tempted, beguiled. She was much like, you know, these girls that now are so ready and so willing to lose their virginity that they just want to be touched by whoever, just as long as they're touching them. I mean, it is crazy as far as the sexuality in young children now, especially with their being bombarded by MTV and everything that they see on TV. Even at even younger now, like elementary school and at very young ages, they are wanting to engage in sexual, as far as sexual experiences, and being touched for the first time. It makes me think of Eve, that she was just excited by the feeling and just by being caressed or loved and showered with, because I know Lucifer just, he beguiled her in a very essential way, and it, like these young girls, I mean, it was difficult for her to say no and to stop and to understand what she was going through, just because this was a new experience. These feelings that she was having were completely new, and they excited her, and they were absolutely taking her breath away, and she was feeling and having sensations that she never had before. And then, just like these young girls, she was wanting to experience that again, and repeated the action with Adam. And the Most High had foreseen this. This is why he told them when he cast them out of paradise that now I'm going to put you in the flesh. You're going to be transformed in the flesh. And in the first book of Adam and Eve, it speaks about this transformation and how they didn't even understand that they were walking when they were kicked out of the garden, because I guess they float around in their immortal bright nature. You don't have to walk. They didn't understand the experience of sunshine. They thought it was a monster to come to devour them, to burn them. They had never experienced night. They didn't understand what it was to eat or to drink or anything as far as the flesh. All those experiences were completely new to them. And so it's much like being born a babe, but already being in adult form, because they weren't birthed, they were created, and then they fell. And so, and this is what all humans go through. I was the same way as both of you. I was running around being, womanizing, and also being involved in multiple relationships. I didn't hold any kind of sanctity to a relating with another individual as far as a woman, and I was definitely not monogamous, and had multiple girlfriends, and I traveled a lot, so I'd have girlfriends in different states, in different cities, in different towns, and talking to 3 or 4 of them at a time. And I'm sure you were the same way. And all of us, when we first
I think Zen, Zen, I think you were a bigger stud than me. Just kidding.
Well, no, I was just running wild as much as I could during that time. And it wasn't until very much later that I learned that, as far as a relationship and engaging in a relationship with somebody that you care, that you can't do those kind of things because it totally destroys it. And once there's no trust, that you can never regain it. And if you really love somebody, and I'm sure that all of us have really been in love, but we don't honor the person or honor the relationship in a way that would preserve it as sacred. And so that's the problem. And it's challenging in this day and age because we're taught to seek out and to be as deviant as we can, to cheat on our spouses, and to, if even if you're married, if somebody comes into your day and you have a chance to indulge, why not? And so that's the mindset of this day and age. And so, as far as a holy and sacred relationship, that's a very rare commodity in this world.
And it seems to be the world's been designed just for that. What were we going to say, Brad?
No, I was just going to say that, the media around us no longer has any examples of what a a normal, wholesome.
Right.
You can't find it.
It doesn't exist, and they don't want it to.
Right, and so again, it's the dividing, the dividing and conquering, and it's the ruling through fear. And I look back at the years when I was playing the field and womenizing, and the level of stress and strain on my life, trying to play a full deck of cards was not I was thinking it was all great and awesome and stuff, and because the world wants you to think like, oh, you're really macho, you're a real big stud and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
In reality, it divides you. It fills you with fear and stress, and weakens your immune system and makes you sick. And there's nothing good about it.
Yeah, now you actually put your life at risk.
Yeah.
Well, it goes back to some of your research. At least I'm going to go back to this, Zen, is you talk about in your work about what happened after the flood with Ham and Noah's second wife. And this seems to be the line of the Canaanites and all that other stuff, right? And seems to be what we are living under is their system. I don't even want to talk a little bit about that and what happened there. Have you ever thought about that? I mean, what was going on in the mind of Noah's second wife? Did she do it to herself deliberately again, like we talk about what happened with Eve? What happened there? Have you ever thought about it?
I have thought about it, and I read this story from many different sources in order for me to be able to picture and to put together what actually happened. And so the story, and this is supported by Scripture, and again, all of this is found in my fourth book, because most people don't understand, and they believe that the seed of Cain was completely wiped out with the flood. But that's not the case. And the reason being is because, as it said in the parable of the sower in Matthew chapter 13, Yeshua said, let both grow together until the time of the end. And at the end, he'll send his angels as reapers out to separate the tares for burning and the wheat for preservation. And so there had to be a remnant in order for the seed of Cain to have continuation. And also the giants, the Og of Bashan was spared, and I speak about this in my book as well. He was the one giant, and it's crazy as it sounds. It talks about how Noah had harbored him, and he had ridden on top of the ark, and that Noah had fed him in order to preserve him. And it even says in Scripture that Og was the last remnant giant. And after the flood, he involved himself with the children of Ham. But I guess I'll tell the story of Ham first. There's two different angles of this. One is from the book of Jasher, and the other is from the writings of Abraham. One speaks of the book of Jasher speaks of Japheth and Shem as being born of Noah's first wife, and that Ham was not from the same mother. And it doesn't say what had happened to her, but it just says that Ham, was conceived of a different line and a different wife, and that it was after the flood, after Noah had, he had planted a vineyard, and that the grapes had come to became ripe, and he had created some fermented some of them and created some wine, that his wife was drunk. And even though it says that Noah was drunk, his wife was drunk too, and it says in Leviticus 18:8 that the nakedness of the father, it actually is, when you see the nakedness of the father, that is actually a reference to the wife and to the mother. And so the story, and it says this specifically in the Targums, it says that what came about of Ham seeing the nakedness of his father was that he was the father of Canaan, and Canaan was his fourth-born son. And because the Most High had blessed Noah and his wife and his 3 sons and their 3 wives, he did not curse Ham, but he cursed Canaan. And the reason he did so is because Ham had slept with his mother, and she became pregnant with his seed and bare his child Canaan. And that's why Canaan is known as the usurper, and because he took over in Shem's land. In the drawing of the lots, Shem had inherited the land of Israel, which came to be known as Canaan, because the Canaanites took it over unjustly. And it was also because they did so, and they had propagated there in the Middle East, that also Og, the last remnant giant, he was involved with their line. That's why you have Nimrod being cited as a Gibberim, and that the giants, there were many afterwards, because even Goliath was of that line, the Philistine giant, and he came from the loins of Og and the children of Ham, the Canaanites. And so the story is that Canaan was cursed to be a servant unto Shem, and Shem, after the flood, he was known as Melchizedek, and it describes this in as far as the Book of Jubilees and also the Book of Jasher. It speaks about how Shem was known as Melchizedek, and how he was told to stay in this one particular area, which was, Jerusalem. And Jerusalem was known as the city of peace, and all the kings came to acquire from Shem and to get his advice, because he was a very wise individual, and they wanted him to come to their territories, but he was told by God not to leave that area and that land. And so these kings built up a city around him, and this came to be known as Jerusalem. And this is when Abraham was, I believe he was 13 years old. He was kept in a cave because Nimrod had received a vision. When Abraham was born, there was a vision of, as far as the wise men had read the signs and talked about how a child had been born that would usurp Nimrod and would overthrow his kingdom and take his throne. And Terah was the high priest. He was the high priest of Nimrod, and he was one of his advisors and counselors, and he knew that the Nimrod was going to be killing all of these young children. The story of Abraham repeats in the story of Yeshua. It's amazing once you know the details of all that. But anyways, an angel, after Terah places his mother and Abraham and his nurse in a cave and keeps them hidden. And when Abraham is 13 years old, an angel leads him, and he wanders off, and he's not to be seen again until he's 31 years old. And he is led to the tent, the tabernacle where Shem and Noah are, and he is taught, inducted into the ancient order of the Melchizedek priesthood, and also what's called the Church of the Firstborn. You can read about all this in a book called the Writings of Abraham. But anyways, that's when he went back to the land after he had been indoctrinated into this priesthood. He was sent to go back to the land of Shinar and to Sumer, Babylon, and to teach the knowledge of the Most High, because everybody was involved in idolatry. And when he destroyed all of his father's idols, his father gave him up to Nimrod, and that's when Nimrod was going to burn him in that fire, just like Daniel and the other two. And Abraham, and there were a couple other that was with him, and he refused to leave. It was one of his kin was the head of, like the security, the chief, the captain of the army, and he was going to break them out and allow them to escape and then report that they had escaped, but Abraham refused, and so they threw him into the fire, and he was preserved. And when they did so, they threw him into this fire, this furnace. The fire leapt out and scalded and burned so many of the priests and the chiefs, the captains of Nimrod's army. And when he saw that nothing had happened to Abraham, and Abraham was preserved, he was called out. And then, they gave credit to the God of Nimrod, and the God of Abraham. But then after that, he was led out, and left and went to the land of Canaan, and that's when he was told that his seed would multiply as the stars of heaven, and that he would inherit that land. And that was fulfilled when Moses led the Israelites out of the bondage of Egypt and crossed the Red Sea, and then Joshua went into the land of Canaan and killed the sons of Anak, because Og had propagated with the Canaanites, and there were many giants living in the land during that time. And so you see the wars and the battles between giants, Joshua and the giants, the sons of Anak, for many years, and for several of the judges of Israel thereafter. And they didn't kill them all, because, of course, you have the same thing with Goliath being the Philistine champion during David's day, and they were fighting giants. And even late in David's life, there were still wars with these giants. And it talks about in Chronicles and also in 2 Kings how David's family, they told him not to go to war with them anymore. They were worried about him, and some of his ancestors had killed the other 4 brothers of Goliath. And so you see these wars ongoing for a very long time. And the seed of Cain and also the giants, they were preserved, and they made it through the flood, and they propagated thereafter.
About the giants, so prior to the flood, what I'm getting is an impression that prior to the flood, they were much larger than after the flood. And when Og started, I guess, copulating, mating with human women, or normal human women, I guess, whatever you want to call it. And so the size must have diminished. They were still large. Yeah, the Bible says they're about 13 feet, 11 feet, 13 feet, one that they talked about. Whatever it be, I don't know. But is that your impression as well, that prior to the flood they were much bigger? And if that's the case, is that the reason why they were able to make the kind of structures that they made? Did they actually use these larger beings, giants, that we can't comprehend now, because we don't have anything like it as reference?
Yeah, it's my opinion that they were even larger than that the original giants were as tall as the cedar trees, and it makes reference to that. But also humanity was of larger stature and had longer lifetimes prior to the flood. that, they lived 900 and something years. Adam lived 930 years. Methuselah lived 970 years right before the flood of Noah's day. And it was afterwards, after the flood, that not only the giants were reduced in stature and lifetime because they had extremely long lifespans, and their longevity was reduced to 500 years, as it says in the book of Enoch. But also, it talks about how even Noah and his wife, their bones, the bones of Noah's wife were found in Turkey, where Ron Wyatt had discovered the ark.
Right.
I mean, not the ark, but the boat. Well, yeah, it is the ark as well, but not the Ark of the Covenant, but the actual the ship that they were preserved in. And the bones of Noah's wife showed that she was 14 feet tall. And so Noah and his wife were also what we would consider to be giants. But, it was afterwards that humanity started to be reduced in stature after the after the generation of Noah. Then they lived to like 460 years, and then they kept reducing. I think Abraham 175 years, and then slowly dwindled down to like 120 years, and now a generation is 70 years. And so even the humanity would be, pre-flood, would be what we consider to be giants. But the giants, the real giants, the hybrid, the six-fingered, six-toed, double sets of teeth giants, they were massive. I would say they were 30-plus feet. And, yeah, that's why they were able to, as tall as a cedar tree. And that's why they were able to lift those huge and to create those huge megalithic sites that we see in, places like Baalbek and others. And there was recently a wall found in Russia which had stones that were even larger than the stone of the pregnant woman, which is the largest of the trilithon stones there in Baalbek. These stones were even larger.
Really?
Than the, yeah. It's amazing.
So yeah, the dynamics are going on. Definitely, we're devolving. We're nothing like our ancestors were prior to the flood and after. I have to ask this question. It's been lingering in my mind ever since I've been reading this book, the book of Adam and Eve, and that is this whole thing about the covenant of 5,500 years. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah, that's a very fascinating subject.
Oh, yeah, it is, and it's very controversial, I imagine, as well. What is your take on it? Because you know what? Okay, this is what I'm gonna suggest something. This whole thing that we're getting as far as like evolution, saying that the Earth is billions of years old, and then there's the other argument that's been pushed on us as well, that is only 6,000 years old, could possibly be a Hegelian dialect. In other words, we're arguing about things that are not necessarily true. And if I'm reading correctly from the book of Adam and Eve, and that covenant of 5,500 years, well, that happened 2,000 years ago, didn't it? Correct?
Mm-hmm. Right.
That means the Earth is this place that we call Earth is much older than we say. And
yeah, that's what I believe.
So what did you get out of it? Tell me more about this. Tell us more about this 5,500 years.
All right. Let me find this one particular thing. But there's a book that was put out by George Pember, and he talks about in this book, the whole gap theory and how it says in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, and between Genesis verse 1 and 1 and chapter 1, verse 2, that somehow the earth became null and void. But that initially when the earth was created, that it was not created null and void, but that the fallen angels and a judgment against them had caused it to be null and void, and that and without form, and that what is described in Genesis is the recreation of the earth. And so there was a previous generation. And this is mentioned also in Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 23, where it talks about a time when there was no man. All the birds of the heaven fled, and all the cities of the plain were destroyed. And it's my opinion that this was a judgment, just like Atlantis, the destruction of Atlantis, that there was it was a judgment against the fallen angels for involving themselves in opening stargates and inviting into this dimensionality powers and principalities which they were not supposed to do and not supposed to involve themselves with. It speaks about this in the Emerald Tablets, where it says that the man was involved in calling up the dark beings from below, and that these entities were interdimensional, and that they were formless of another vibration. And it says that they were serpent-headed, and how they had taken over the councils of men, and how they killed man and took over and ruled in his place, meaning as far as the royals. But you asked me about the 5,500 years, and so because you did so, I have to read this one particular passage that is shared at the very end of the Gospel of Nicodemus, which is one of the books I had told you about.
And I read a portion of it on my shelf, so yeah. Especially about about Christ going, I guess, to hell for 3 days before he came back. He was resurrected, right? Well, during his time.
This is right after that particular story. Pilate goes to them and he asked them about Yeshua, and he asked them if they knew that he was the Son of God, and if they had indeed murdered the Son of God. And so they close the temple doors and they make sure that nobody is listening, and then they bring out this massive book, and they begin to read from it, and this is what they said, and this applies to that 5,500 years. So listen to this. It says, "And Annas and Caiaphas, when they were thus adjured, commanded all the rest that they were will them to go out of the temple." And they're very hush-hush about this. "And they themselves shut all the doors of the temple and of the sanctuary, and said unto Pilate, Thou hast adjured us, O excellent judge, by the building of this temple, to make manifest unto thee the truth and reason, or a true account. After that we had crucified Jesus, knowing not that he was the Son of God, but supposing that by some chance he did his wondrous works, we made a great assembly, a synagogue in this temple, and as we conferred one with another concerning the signs of the mighty works which Jesus had done, we found many witnesses of our own nation who said that they had seen Jesus alive after his passion." He was resurrected. Not only was he resurrected, but he also resurrected all the dead that were in Sheol.
Was Adam one of them?
Yeah, Adam, Seth, all of the old patriarchs, Daniel, many of them were, there. All of them that had died up until even the thief on the cross, which he said, "You will be this day in paradise with me." That's also found in the story. But anyways, we found many witnesses of our own nation who said that they had seen Jesus alive after his passion, and that he was passed into the height of heaven. Moreover, we saw 2 witnesses whom Jesus raised from the dead, who declared unto us many marvelous things, which Jesus did among the dead, which things we have in writing in our hands. Now our custom is that every year before our assembly we open this Holy Bible and inquire the testimony of God, And we have found in the first book of the 70 how that Michael, the angel, spake unto the third son of Adam, the first man concerning the 5,500 years, wherein should come the most beloved Son of God, even Christ. And furthermore, we have thought that peradventure this same was the God of Israel, which said unto Moses, Make thee an ark of the covenant in length 2 cubits and a half, and in breadth 1 cubit and a half, in height 1 cubit and a half. For by those 5 cubits and a half we have understood and known the fashion of the ark of the old covenant, for that in 5,000 and a half thousand years Jesus Christ should come in the ark of his body. So, they're comparing the ark that that Noah had created to preserve he and his family, that the measurements conferred and also reiterated that Yeshua would come in the body 5,500 years after Adam was cast out of paradise. So here's the rest of it. And we have found that he is the God of Israel, even the Son of God. For after his passion, we, the chief of the priests, because we marveled at the signs which came to pass on his account, did open the Bible and searched out all the generations unto the generations of Joseph and Mary, the mother of Christ, taking her to be the seed of David. And we found that from the day when God made the heaven and the earth and the first man, from that time unto the flood are 2,212 years. And from the flood unto the building of the tower, 531 years. And from the building of the tower unto Abraham, 606 years. And from Abraham unto the coming of the children of Israel out of Egypt, 470 years. And from the going of the children of Israel out of Egypt unto the building of the temple, 511 years. And from the building of the temple unto the destruction of the same temple, 464 years. So far found we in the Bible of Esdras, and inquiring from the burning of the temple unto the coming of Christ and his birth, we found it to be 636 years, which together are 5,500 years, like as we found it written in the Bible, that Michael the archangel declared before unto Seth, the third son of Adam, that after 5,500 years Christ the Son of God hath come. Hitherto have we told no man. Now listen, they're keeping this a secret. Hitherto have we told no man, lest there should be a schism in our synagogue. And now, O excellent judge, thou hast adjured us by this holy Bible of the testimonies of God, and we do declare it unto thee. And we also have adjured thee by thy life and health, that thou declare not these words unto any man in Jerusalem. So the Pharisees are basically hiding that they know that Yeshua was the Son of God and that they had killed him, and that he had fulfilled the prophecy that was given to Seth that he would come exactly 5,500 years after Adam was banished from paradise.
That's just mind-blowing. It's really mind-blowing. Yes, it is.
That's amazing. I've never heard that before. You guys are teaching me a lot this evening here on this on this portion. Where did you read that from, Suzanne?
This is from the Gospel of Nicodemus. It's the very last portion after the descent into hell. And I read about these things in my 7th book, Skyfall, because I talk about this particular prophecy. Also, I have all the passages from the first book of Adam and Eve, and there are others, even in the Apocalypse of Moses, that talk about this prophecy and how Christ even told Adam when he cast him out, because it was the word of God. It was Yeshua that cast him out of paradise and told him that that he would come, and God also, Yahweh, the Father, had told him about this prophecy, and it's all written in the first book of Adam and Eve, which is, according to the Thracian Chronicles, it's the oldest book of the biblical scriptures, because it was the testimony of Adam. Oh, I wanted to say one thing before I forgot too. You were talking about Job and how we had all learned from Job's example as far as perseverance, and how to, as far as suffering, how to be graceful in that. Well, there's a book called The Testament of Job that not many people know about. And the thing about the book of Job is that everybody thinks that God just made a pact with Satan. He just said, all right, well, why don't you go and, excuse me, you have the authority to test my servant Job. But it wasn't that way at all. If you read the Testament of Job, what Job was doing is he was going around and he was destroying the groves and also the high temples that were built upon the mountains where they were doing these child sacrifices and where they were worshiping Satan. And Satan was mad at him. He was, disturbed that he was destroying these places of worship where the pagans, offered sacrifices to Satan. And so God went to Job and sent an angel to him and told him that if you continue to do this, Job, you're going to inquire the wrath of Satan, and he's going to come after you. But he told him then in the book, in the Testament of Job, that if you continue if you continue to stand up for me and you continue to be to walk in this holy path, you're going to be persecuted, but afterwards I will bless you twofold, so that you will increase in bountiful measure. And Job basically says, bring it on, allow him to come. And so that's where the book of Job picks up. And Satan goes and makes this pact with the Most High to test Job, and then he does so. But Job knew he was coming. It wasn't like the Most High just said, oh, well, why don't you go test my servant Job? He's a righteous man. He had already gave him fair warning and told him the consequences of his actions, and Job was totally willing to engage it head on.
Do you have a link to that book? Is there a PDF that we can read?
What, the Testament of Job?
Yeah.
All you got to do is look it up, Testament of Job, and Google search. It should come up.
Okay.
It's one of the pseudepigraphal books. It's not very difficult to find.
Well, I've never even heard of it. I would have even thought of it.
Well, one of the, that, like I said, I spend all my time reading all the extra biblical and the canonical texts, as well as the regular canon. And I've read a lot of books that most people have never even heard about.
Oh, yeah.
And I know how they connect together.
I'm trying to catch up with you. That's what I'm trying to do. You're so ahead of the game here. It's amazing. So, yeah, and it makes more sense. It certainly gives more encouragement of this story than even the story that's in the Bible. Which once again makes me think. You gave an example of how the Pharisees deliberately hid the 5,500 years. Did they do the same thing again in our time in the past 500 years with the New English translations and all that? I mean, what's your impression about why they have encouraged us so strong? I can just imagine what my Baptist friends who listen to this show are thinking right now. You know what I mean? And a lot of other folks too. I mean, they probably find this blasphemous what we're talking about, but to me, it's refreshing and so rewarding to hear this stuff. Do you think that there's been a Luciferian satanic agenda that hides a lot of this stuff from us?
Absolutely, and there's a passage in the book of Thomas, and I'll pull it up real quick. verse 39. It says, let me pull it up real quick, because Yeshua tells us about how the Pharisees would try to hide the truth from us, and how they would keep everything as far as the secrets of the kingdom, they would keep it from us.
Wow.
Hold on, I got to find it real quick. But this is also a very interesting text, and I recommend people read it as well.
This is very interesting stuff. Very interesting. Before we end this night, gentlemen, I would like to talk a little bit as well about the Sabbath that's coming up, and talk about the Lord's Sabbath, and how that was hidden from us as well, because this is all connected.
Yeah, sure. Brad, you want to comment on that while I'm looking this up?
Yeah, it all comes down to trying to remove the power from us and remove the authority that's created in us by our loving Father and our Creator. And what, Zen, you were just talking about the Testament of Job. I've always thought that there was more to the story, or thought that there was, the translation didn't come through quite accurately, that, the facts, Chris was saying this last night in our discussion, that every time the Bible makes a reference to the Creator being this big, bad, authoritarian force that wants to punish you and for the slightest little transgression is never that. It's always this loving Creator. And what you're saying about the Testament of Job and his warning to Job is another statement of how he is this loving Creator that loves us as his children. And he came forward and said, "Hey, look out, this is coming." And so and the Sabbath is the same thing. I took the time a few years ago to study into the Pharisaical beliefs and teachings back during the time of Christ, and it is amazing. We absolutely live in a Pharisaical society, and there's not a single adult living today that can't go through the day without breaking some law of man. And there's laws and laws upon laws upon laws, and people don't even know about them. In fact, there's even websites out there that are dedicated to the obscure, goofy laws that have been passed over the ages. So, we absolutely live in a Pharisaical society, and Yeshua came to preach against the bankers in the Pharisaical society, against the Jesuits and the and the lawyers that we are enslaved to today.
Well, it makes you mentioned the Jesuits, and of course, I'm going to bring up something about that, but it makes me think, there's a lot of folks out there, especially in the Roman Catholic Church, who feel that there is a strong connection between the Jesuits and what you're talking about, this apostate, Pharisees. There's a connection between the apostate Jewish sect that's out there. And so I don't know if it's true or not. I don't know, but it's starting to look like there's a strong connection that between the two.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I want people to know that we're not anti-Jewish and we're not anti-Roman Catholic people. The people themselves. And I have a sister who is a Roman Catholic and a brother who's an Eastern Orthodox. And so, of course, we all grew up Mormons, and so it would be really inevitable that we would all end up somehow joining another cult. But the thing is that I'm starting to realize is this organized religion, Satan is at control of all of this stuff, man. And they've done a great job of hiding so much of the truth from us that just a few things that we learned this evening have been so refreshing, and so it's it's although the people around us, I can only imagine what Zen has gone through in his life and the attacks and the rejection he's received. But at the same token, that freedom of knowing the truth. No?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd have it no other way. Because I feel like I'm standing with the Most High, and I don't care about all the, I care about my fellow brethren, but as far as their judgment of me and what they think of me, because I study the extra biblical text, if they choose not to, and they choose to condemn people that do, I'm not bound by any of that at all. And it just actually leads me perfectly to the passage in the Gospel of Thomas, verse 39. It says, Jesus said, the Pharisees and the scribes have taken the keys of knowledge and hidden them. They themselves have not entered, nor have they allowed to enter those who wish to. You, however, be as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. I mean, it basically sums it up perfectly. They have hidden. The Council of Nicaea was about keeping truth from the people, and all of these pastors and preachers and ministers, most of them, they teach that all of these extra biblical books are that they're bad and that you shouldn't read them, and people adhere to that. They avoid them like they're the plague, and it's amazing to me because there's not even one story, there's actually one story in the gospel about the youth of Christ, and that's the story when he was 13 years old, and he left his parents, and they retraced their steps, and they found him in the temple teaching the rabbis there. But there's no other stories of Christ as far as his infancy, his youth, his younger years, until he came out in his ministry, and all these people that call themselves Christians are disciples of Christ, and yet they know nothing about his life or his coming into flesh. They only the virgin birth, the Immaculate Conception, and then one story of his youth. And you have to study the extra biblical books in order to get any detail on what's called the infancy gospels. And there's several collections of them, one written by James, who was the first rabbi, the priest as far as the Jerusalem church after Yeshua's death. He was also the half brother of Yeshua from Joseph, Joseph's previous marriage. And all these stories, unless you read them, you have no real detail. Like, I'll give you one more example, since Brad had talked about how when you know the full story, you know how the Most High is compassionate, even though he is portrayed as being homicidal in the text so many times. And this has to do with the story of Abraham and Isaac, and also Ishmael, because when Ishmael was 13 years old, he was circumcised, and he was talking to Isaac, who was his younger brother, and he was bragging to him that he would give, his foreskin to God, and basically that he was doing more in that way than Isaac ever had. And Isaac basically bragged back to him, saying that if it was required of him, that he would happily give his life to the Most High, to God. And one of the angels had heard him, and so that challenge was brought forth to Isaac. But Isaac knew in the story, when you read the fullness of the story that is in the Targums and also in some of the other pseudepigraphal texts, and I have done a whole show on this. I don't have all that information before me, but Isaac knew that when he and his father were going to the mountain and that they were going to do this great sacrifice, that his father was supposed to sacrifice him. And his father, Abraham, was scared, and and shaking and didn't want to do it. And yet Isaac was encouraging him, telling him to bind him tightly so that neither he nor his father would change his mind, and that he was willing, he was okay with being this great sacrifice for the Most High God. And so this was a test for both he and Abraham, that Abraham would be willing to give his his second-born son, but his most beloved son. And this was a reflection of Yeshua coming into the flesh, because the Father gave his only begotten Son. And so it was a reflection of that, in that he would actually, the Most High would actually give his Son to die on the cross and be crucified and murdered and sacrificed for us in order to give us a forgiveness of sins. And Abraham was willing to do the same to Isaac, and Isaac was willing to be that sacrifice. He was encouraging his father in the story when you get all the real details of it. He was encouraging his father to do the deed and to actually sacrifice him. And when both of them were to the point that they were going to do it, that's when the angel came and stayed Abraham, prevented his arm from going down, and they found a ram. It makes me want to cry even right now, but they found a ram in the thicket, and both Abraham and Isaac, they just hugged and bawled together and cried together. And it's a very moving story when you read the fullness of it. But it also, again, when you know the details, it shows you that the Most High is not asking them to do anything that he would not do for us. And he never was going to allow Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, because Isaac is the child of promise. And Ishmael is considered to be the seed of the serpent. Just like with Jacob, Jacob is favored, but Esau is hated. Esau is considered also to be the seed of the serpent, and Isaac and both Jacob are the seed of promise and the line whom Yeshua would be born through.
Interesting. Do you think the reason why so many followers of Christ in the world today find the church so hollow and empty is because they take away this all these extra biblical texts?
I think that's one of the reasons. The other is that they have no real answer for the hard questions, such as the serpency and also pre-existence and also the fallen angels and the giants. The pastors, if you go up to them and ask them about any of these things, or go up to them and ask them why Jacob was favored and Esau was hated, when Esau had never yet even been born and he was a baby. How could a kind, compassionate, loving God hate a child that had not yet born? Again, all of that is connected to pre-existence and election. And if you don't understand that we were part of the council of the mighty, that we were part of the sons of God, and that in Psalms 82, when it says that you will die the death of man, that is reference to all of us. Because as the angels, as an angel, as an angelic being, even like Adam and Eve, they were bright-natured and immortal before their fall, before their banishment from paradise, their exile to this world. That same principle applies to all of us. Our spirits pre-existed with the Most High, with the Father and the Son. Just like as it says in Proverbs 8, he knew us from the beginning. Ephesians 1, that we were predestinated, and that, our election, the things that we did during the war in heaven and shortly thereafter, that is what determines our circumstances and our situations of being born into the flesh. And that's also why Jacob was favored, and the seed of the woman, the line of Adam, is favored, and why the sons of Esau and the line of Cain, they're hated. It all has to do with that election. And the priests, pastors, ministers, none of them can explain that to you. They don't even want to hear those questions. That's why none of them will even touch that. There will be no sermons on Jacob being favored and Esau hated, because they can't explain it. It's the same thing with Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 4 and 5, where the word of the Lord goes to Jeremiah, tells him, I knew you before you ever entered into the womb of your mother. I had ordained you to be a prophet unto the nations. It's the same thing with all of us. He knew us before we were ever joined with our body, our spirits joined with the flesh. That's who we are now. We're angelic beings caught up in fallen flesh form, but only until death. And then, depending on what we did and how we behaved and our actions here, that will determine our eternal inheritance. And there's so much of Scripture that talks about, the wheat and how they will be favored, the righteous, and to be numbered and counted among the elect. And then the tares, those that are preserved for burning, and so all of that division, that enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, it's ongoing and it's playing out right now. And we are at the end of days. We're the final generation. So all of that will be played out and will end at some time, I believe, very soon.
Well, it seems to me that God elected you to be a voice in the wilderness to bring back to life a lot of these missing texts that have been taken away from us, to have a better or more fuller understanding of His Word, His message, and the truth of history. I'm not saying that just to, feed your ego. It seems to be that way. I mean, if one can only honestly deduce that that's actually what's going on. I mean, why did God put you in the circumstances that you're in, and to slow you down enough to deliver this message? Because let's face it, if you were living the pace that you were living before, well, you would be of the use that you are right now. So
I agree, and this is my role. This is my mission. This is my sacred vow, and that's why I'm here, and this is what I'm here to do and fulfill.
So let's before we end this, because we've been doing this for a while, I don't want to quit, but I also want people to hear this, and because there's been some really important stuff, and I'm sure it's going to upset a lot of people. It's going to upset the apple cart here, but I think it needs to be done at this point. We need to really just get real about things and get real honest about stuff and make our decisions right now. Really, what we want. Do we want our Lord and Savior, the way, the truth, and the life, by Yeshua the Messiah, and this whole message, or do we want just part of it that suits our fancies and our own desires? Now, going back to that,
no more PC talk and no more sweet nothings in our ears. Let's speak truth and understand truth.
Absolutely.
Well,
absolutely.
God inspired me to name this show a very simple title, Nothing But the Truth. He did. One night I was like, what am I going to name my show? And I was like a month into it, and it's okay, that's it, okay. But then that's really what my desire is, and I think there's other people out there that want to know the truth too. And I hope that it's God's elect, or want that. I don't know. I don't know. I can only tell you, gentlemen, many a day I ask myself, why am I doing what I'm doing? Because this is not what I chose, honestly. People say otherwise, and I know Chris says, we just, what the scriptures say, but I have to tell you, if I chose what I wanted, I'd be doing something completely different, because, although God is definitely changing my heart and changing it to a heart of flesh instead of stone, and being more compassionate and being more desirous to share the truth with people. A couple of years ago, you know what? It was 6 years ago, 4 years ago, I was all about me, what I could get out of this world. And So
I was right there.
I have no idea why I'm doing my job. But
Well, it's been a longer time for me, but yeah.
But I want to ask Brad to talk to us a little bit about, because I guess we're going to have on the 9th we're going to have a Sabbath, and on the 11th, is that correct?
And
then
we have a beginning of the month coming.
Explain that to us a little bit, because this is a foreign concept for the majority of God's children at this point, even what the lunar Sabbath is, but let alone why we're going to have 2 Sabbaths and almost back to back.
Well, I think the simplest way to put it is our discussion has been around a loving Creator and Father who recognized from the beginning that we could easily be corrupted and easily enslaved to time by man and laws by man. And so, the Pharisaical way is this intermediary person between us and Christ or the Creator. And so, that becomes the Pope, the Vicar of Christ, your pastor, whatever you have. And he established at the beginning in that creation the time and a stellar timepiece, which is the moon and the sun and the stars. And by establishing those as a way to order your time and order your lives, being the lunar calendar, we don't have to be enslaved by a printed calendar by Pope Gregory, or before that by Pope Julian, or by Julian. So it is his time that we then order our lives by, and we the peasant living on the hillside can look up and know what time it is and what day it is without having to succumb to some organization, corporation, whatever you have that prints out a calendar every year and says, okay, this is when you need to show up to work. And this is when you get to rest, and this is how you order your lives. And the historical way was looking for a more mature crescent, and it speaks about it in Leviticus, where it speaks of the beginning of the year being the ripening of the barley for the wave offering, and that would be the beginning of the year, shortly after the spring equinox. And so another way to look at it is in the creation week, the sun and the moon were ordered on the 4th day of creation. So you have the 5th day of creation, so 24 hours later. Then you have the 6th day of creation, so now 48 hours later. And so 2 days after the sun and the moon are ordered, or in another way of putting it in our common phrases today would be conjunction. So the sun and the moon ordered or placed in conjunction on the 4th day of creation. 2 days later, or 48 hours later, you see a mature or horned crescent. And if you go back and look at some of the writings of Josephus, talking about how the Sanhedrin worked and how they began the month and how they would announce the beginning of the month. They would have to have witnesses come in and testify that they had seen a horned crescent. There's documents out there that speak of drawings or etchings in the walls of the temple to have the witnesses point to the maturity of the crescent that they saw. And once they had established that there was a mature crescent or a horned crescent, then the announcement went out that the beginning of the month would be tomorrow, or the new moon would begin tomorrow. And interestingly, some of the historical writings was that they would light these fires on top of the hills and the mountains to send a signal around to the nation afar that the central Sanhedrin had announced that the month was beginning. There also are some writings about people starting these bonfires or these signal fires to try to confuse and cause problems for the Hebrew nation. Like there's always rebel rousers and troublemakers, but the interesting thing about the Hebrew calendar and the biblical Sabbath is that it is anchored off of the ripe barley or the first harvest in their land, and the Islamic lunar calendar isn't anchored off of anything, so it migrates throughout the year. And I'm sure most of our listeners are aware, and you guys are aware, there was kind of a bit of a hoopla this year that Muhammad's birthday fell on Christmas Day this year.
Oh, it did. I had no idea. If it's been interesting, okay.
But that they were making a big deal about that, and the reason it happened to fall on Christmas Day this year was because their calendar isn't anchored to a season; it migrates throughout the year. So if you were born in the summer, a few years later you could be celebrating your birthday in the winter. However, the Hebrew scriptural calendar is anchored off of the first harvest of the year in the spring, which then begins the new year. Therefore, the Passover and the beginning of the year. So that's a long, quick little explanation of how the calendar works. And each month, the simplest and easiest way to remember it is that you have the fourth day of creation, which is conjunction 48 hours later. That evening, you would see a more mature crescent, and it usually falls between 6 and 8% illumination, and most of the time it's right almost perfectly at 7% illumination. Is that horned crescent that you see that begins the month. And so the new moon Sabbath, or the first day of Sabbath, or the first day of the month is a Sabbath in remembrance of the first Sabbath of creation. And then from there you count 7 days to the weekly Sabbath. So then you would from the beginning of the month, you would then count 7 days, and so then on the 8th would then be the next Sabbath, and then 7 days later would be the next Sabbath, and so forth throughout the month. And then once the moon had reached maturity and then goes back to conjunction again, you start the new month. And the 13th month throughout the year, you'll often hear of them talking about adding a 13th month to the calendar, which is Adar 2, if I remember correctly. That is you have to do that to be able to keep the calendar in sync with the seasons. And so there is a greater cycle on top of that, which is a 19-year cycle, which is called the Metonic cycle. And so there are some years that have 12-month lunar months and some years that have 13-month lunar years.
Interesting. Do you think this whole thing about like Isis, horse, Osiris, and the 13, and this whole, well, Luciferians, they like to use that number 13 as a way of mocking this, what you just said, or some kind of like subtle hint or a wink to those that know. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, I've often thought of that as well, why there is this, in the West, this fear of the number 13.
I know they associate with Friday the 13th and the Templars. They say they do, but is it something deeper?
Yeah, I don't know. I've actually tried to study that out and tried to figure that out myself. I find it fascinating that
because certainly the Templars should have known about this with their journeys to the Middle East and them taking over Jerusalem and raiding it, and they certainly should have figured this stuff out themselves, right?
Yeah, it's fascinating that we live in a modern world, and yet you can go into a new hotel, and most of the hotels that you can go into don't have a 13th floor listed in the elevator.
Yeah, it's almost like there's some kind of psychological programming going on to say to avoid this whole scenario. So, anyways, the next Sabbath, if I'm correct, gentlemen, starts Friday evening through Saturday, and then 2 days later there's another Sabbath. Am I correct?
I think it's on the 11th.
Yeah, it's actually.
Oh yeah.
It's actually.
Yeah, you mean the last one of the month? Yeah.
Yeah, the last Sabbath.
Go ahead.
The last Sabbath of this month will be Monday.
Right.
And then the next Sabbath after that will be Wednesday.
So it's Monday, Wednesday, so it has nothing to do. Okay, so I'm ahead a couple days here. Is what I am. So it starts. So the 11th would be. Let's see. If the 9th is Saturday, the 11th would be Monday. So we should start Sunday evening or Monday evening.
Well, there is some discourse out there around that. That's an interesting thing that you bring up. There is some writing out there that speaks to sundown to sun up, but then there's also a scripture that speaks to 12 hours being in the day, and so there are people out there that believe that the Sabbath is from sunrise to sunset.
Dave Nicao is one of them, and hopefully he'll be on my show Saturday. So he's got a website called ChristianityBeliefs.com and RomanCatholicBeliefs.com, and so he's one of those lunar Sabbatarians that believes what you're saying, that it starts at sunrise. So.
Yeah, so there is definitely some differences in belief out there, and from what I've seen, I haven't found anything definitively either way.
I go by the creation the evening and the morning were, the first day, and then the evening and morning, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
that's logical too. So
yeah.
as we go through this journey and deprogram ourselves from all the satanic delusion that we've been under all our whole lives, these things are going to be of complications, and we'll figure it out as time goes on, right? I'm assuming, just like everything else. I mean, let's face it. A year ago, gentlemen, the three of us thought the Earth was a ball revolving around the sun. So,
right. Hey, can I clarify something really quick? Because I'm looking at the calendar, the one that I shared with you, Brett. Mike, and that has the lunar percentages, and it says on the 11th that it will reach the 7% moon. And so isn't that like the new lunar day, the Kadesh? Let me give you the link to what I'm talking about, Brad.
Okay, I'm looking right now. Shoot me that link over. I will tell, that there is, when, and my world has been flipped up a little upside down now that I understand that we live on this flat plane.
Yeah, totally.
So all of us have. We got to question everything now, don't we?
Right.
So I say instead of that turning our world upside down, it's turned our world flat.
Yeah. Thank you for the correct correction. What I have found is that near the winter and spring equinoxes, that the percent of illumination is much greater. And I'm going to chat you a link right now, and I'll tell the listeners what this link is. Let me find it here real quick. It's at Her Majesty's Nautical Almanac office, and the URL for it is astro.uk/moonwatch/next-new-moon.html. And there they have a little application that shows you the visibility of the crescent over the continents and over the Earth. And on January 11th, most of planet Earth can see, or not planet Earth, the plane of Earth. I'm still trying to correct my use of the words, but on the 11th, Southern Australia, New Zealand cannot see the crescent. So on January 11th, that is only 24 hours after conjunction. So to be able to get the whole Earth on the same day or on the same Sabbath, you have to wait that extra day. And
interesting.
And it appears to be more greater than a 7% illumination, and it always happens right around the spring and winter equinoxes, where you can get mixed up by just one day. And it's not, my personal opinion is it doesn't make that big of a difference, because it self-corrects the following month because of the metonic cycle. It works out, and the Creator knows that we're trying to do the best that we can with the information and the technology that we have. But I've found this website that I just mentioned to you and chatted you the link to as being very useful to actually be able to see where we can see that crescent. And, if we were to go with the January 11th as viewing the crescent that evening and new moon the next day on the 12th, then Southern Australia and New Zealand would be left out, and they would be celebrating the Sabbath on a different day than the rest of the world. So we have to wait for that more mature crescent where the whole world can see it and the whole world come together to celebrate Sabbath and the creation with the Creator.
Very interesting.
Gentlemen, for hopefully we can do this again next week. Everyone's really busy and all that, but this is such important information. Hopefully we can do this again. I know we've talked about Zen, that maybe we could do this as more of a regular thing. Maybe next Tuesday we can get together. If we do, if you guys are willing to get together with me next Tuesday, things I would like to talk about in particular are two subjects. There'll be more than this, obviously, but one thing is, knowing what you know now, is there any way possible that you could end up going back to organized religion at this point? And the next thing is, with this lunar Sabbath thing, one of the things that I've been thinking about as far as the geoengineering going on is this Satan's attempt to hide this truth as we become more aware of the phases of the moon and become more attentive of it. Are they going to try in some way to kind of obscure it? I know it's kind of a strange question to ask, but why is Satan so interested in what he's interested in? So, do you understand what I'm saying? If it doesn't make any sense,
because he wants to exalt himself above the stars of God and assume the worship. And that's why the calendar was changed, everything was replaced, Sabbath was distorted, the feasts and the festivals of the Most High, all of that was lost, just like it says in Jubilees chapter 6, like I shared in your last program, how everything would be changed. And that's part of his exalting himself. And the same thing with the flat earth, making the sun the preeminent as far as the solar system and creating the heliocentric Darwinian worldview. It's about replacing the covenant that God has with us and with the earth, and us with the earth. And so all of that is about Lucifer, the light bearer, exalting himself and replacing and stealing the worship of the Most High, the Father and the Son. And so that's my answer in a short. But I'm running out of voice, brothers. I'm going to have to...
We should probably end it right now. This is such a good episode. I'm thinking about chopping it up in a couple sections, at least two, so that more people will listen to it. So, but I want to thank you both for spending your Tuesday, or whatever it is today, this evening. It's now Wednesday, isn't it? On my time. Thank you for spending your evening with me. You didn't have to, and thank you for last night and the previous night. So, are we game for next Tuesday to get together again, son?
I'm down. Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, that sounds good. Let's do it.
And I definitely will be for the Sabbath. One of the things I will be doing is reading the Gospel or the Testament of Job, at least on the show.
Oh yeah, very interesting reading. And you should definitely check out that last part of the Gospel of Nicodemus. I sent a link to both of y'all as well.
Okay, cool. And by the way, Brad, if you can contact Chris as well. Mark just said Thursday night he would like to have that debate about the flat Earth with Chris. So Mark Sargent, that is.
All right, I'll see if I can.
Should be an interesting show. Should be a lot of fun. So
yeah, I look forward to listening to that debate.
Yeah, I definitely want to listen in on that one too.
Some interesting stuff. So, okay, gentlemen, thank you very much. And God bless.
All right, man. God bless everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. So, folks, once again, that was Zen Garcia and Brad Varnholdt. And, of course, you can learn more about these gentlemen. You can find lots of stuff about Zen on YouTube. And Brad's still here. Brad, you're still here, right?
Yes, I am.
How can the people find out more about you? Or do you want that right now? Are you ready for that?
I don't really have that. I mean, the book that Chris and I wrote together, The Destruction of Sabbath, is probably the.
Would that be the best way of getting a hold of you if somebody wants to reach out to you to go to the Chronicle Project and ask for you?
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. Yeah, I don't really have a particular website right now.
I don't either. I got so many great interviews and so many good, nice people, and I have to figure out a way to. I don't have the energy or the time to do a YouTube channel and everything else. You know what I mean? I'm so busy researching and interviewing people. I don't have the time to do all the rest of the stuff. You know what I mean? And be a dad, it's just too much effort. So.
Yeah, that's me. I'm spending time just trying to study and understand our reality, and share what I think I've learned and learn from others. So
it's a lot of work to deprogram yourself, isn't it? Yeah. But as far as Zen, folks, you can once again Fallen Angels TV, online radio. Find Endeavor Freedom YouTube channel, and Zen has 9 books that he's written, so you can look into that stuff. And I personally, I have to tell you something. A year ago, I would not have been able to tolerate or stomach Zen because I was still under a lot of prejudice from other people's teachings. But as time has gone on, I'm starting to realize that Zen has done some really wonderful work. He really has. And that's why I want to bring up this whole thing about next week we get together to think about it. How could we ever go back to organized religion? No, we don't know. It seems to be a giant trap to keep us from knowing this truth. So.
Yeah, that's the purpose. That's the purpose of it. Divide us and separate us from truth.
From God itself, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And you think about Abraham and his journey. You think about all the other prophets of the Old Testament and their journeys, and that had very little to do about belonging to a group. In fact, it all seems to be the opposite. So, I guess we got a lot to talk about still. So, a lot to talk about. And I feel grateful that I found a couple people who are willing to talk about this stuff because, like myself in the past, and some of the others were so narrow-minded in our approach, and we think we got it all figured out. And I think, well, my realization is how little I've got figured out.
Yeah, that's the funny part.
Yeah, I know. We're grown men. We're all in our 40s, and you think that we would have it all figured out, and to come to our age and realize how little truth we know. It truly is. It's obvious as part of the satanic plan between the public school system, organized religion, and everything else to keep us from knowing the truth. If we're now discovering some of it at our age, this is a terrible situation to be in. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah.
But it's a glorious situation to be in because we're willing to at least explore this, to accept it, and try it. So. If I don't talk to you before the Sabbath, have a good one, and hopefully if you get a chance to get a hold of Chris, I've tried to get a hold of him too. That Mark really said Thursday would be the night, so that would be 10 o'clock p.m. my time. So.
All right, sounds good. Well, I'll reach out to Chris, and thank you again for including me on your show tonight.
Oh, thank you, man. Thanks a lot, man. All right, folks, once again, God bless, take care, and we'll carry on in this journey. Thank you for those who have joined, those that will join, and please don't be shy to share this with other people. Help us to spread the word of some of the truth that we have shared tonight. So God bless, take care.